Hello Team Builder, and welcome to another episode of Tools for Team Builders. I'm Dr. Chris Cavert. Today we're going to make a basic bull ring prop for activities that range from simple small group activities to even larger group activities. They're really fun and they're very portable. You don't need a lot of things to be able to do something very powerful with your group. I first learned about this activity from Dr. Jim Kane, and it's also included in his book, Teamwork and Team Play. Dr. Kane and Barry Jolliffe have about 4 different descriptions in their book about how to use the bull ring. But we're not going to get into all the kinds of things you can do with a bull ring. We're just going to show you how you can make one, and I'm going to give it a little bit of a twist on how I use it at the end. So there's some ways to build it, and then there's another way you can actually add a little bit more of group connection when you actually put it together. So it's kind of cool. You're going to need some supplies. So a bull ring involves a ring of some sort and then some string. Then you're going to want some sort of an object to move or transport. And it's usually, in most cases, it's a round object of varying sizes depending on the kind of a ring. The string that I get is called mason twine. There's some other names for it, but it comes in different kinds of colors. In this bull ring, there's yellow, white, and orange. And I specifically do different kinds of colors for certain reasons, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But it comes in a spool. You can get, this is about 250 feet. So I make my cords about 10 feet long. So you have to do the meters conversion if you want to do it in meters. But you can get quite a few. You can get 25 strings out of one of these spools of twine. You're also going to need some sort of a tower or stand. I call them towers because they vary. If you can find these thread spools, these are really cool because they have such a nice base on them. These are industrial thread spools. There's thread wrapped around there, and then they put them on the machines, and then the thread comes out and they do all their sewing with that. So if you have anywhere in your location that maybe is industrial, they can build awnings or tents or anything that professional sewers often have smaller spools. So anywhere you can go find out where they use these and get the discards, that would be great. You can also use PVC. These are actually different size cup links. So these are PVC cup links. And they come in this size, already kind of, not really cut, but they're made this way. And depending on the size of your round object, you will want, the smaller the object that goes, the smaller the stand and the object goes on there, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. If it's bigger, then it's easier to put the ball into that object. So depending on the difficulty, if you have the different sizes, you can have varying levels of degree in your bull ring activity. You can also cut PVC to different heights. So this is actually a waterline PVC, and I can't find it it's not as easy to find the water thin line. It's usually Schedule 40 type of PVC, but then you have to buy a 10-foot length. Some places sell a little shorter where then you can cut it to smaller sizes. But the taller the tower, the more challenging it is to actually complete the activity. So by putting the bull ring over the tower or stand, you got to get the ring all the way down to the bottom and then let go of the strings in a lot of applications. So the taller it is, the more room for error, right? With the smaller cup links, it's a little easier because there's less room to travel with your bull ring. I even had a friend of mine made these. This is actually he cut this out of some pine, drilled a hole in there. Yep, I mean, it's beautiful. And then he had to cut some PVC. He actually had to mill this down so it would fit into the right size hole. But then now there's a transportable PVC tower or stand that you could do different lengths. So this was kind of a prototype he was making, and he gave me a set. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. You could even go the low-tech way and just get toilet paper rolls or paper towel rolls and cut them down if you can get them nice and flat. But a tennis ball and a ring will fit easily over a tennis ball roll. Or a toilet paper roll. All right, so now you've got to get a ring of some sort. And a ring, so we have stands. Now we're going to go for the ring. We got strings, going for the ring. There are all sorts of rings. Here is rings I found at a craft store. Nice and thin for another purpose that I'll show you later. There are different size steel rings found at a hardware store. So depending on how, this is going to be a little bit more difficult. A smaller ring, more likely for a larger object to fall out. A bigger ring, it's easier for the object to stay in, so it's less likely to fall out if you're using something small like a tennis ball. If you increase the size of the object that goes in there, it gets a little more difficult, right? So depending on the size you want to work with, you can find these at hardware stores, craft stores, different places. Some people I've seen even use rubber bands as rings, and then as you pull the strings, they stretch and they expand and contract. So there's other ways to build a bull ring, depending on how difficult or how challenging you want to make it. Now, my preference, my favorite is actually called a binder ring. You can get these in a pack. They come in a pack of 10 to 20 binder rings. Some of them are varied in size. Some of them come in this one size. This is about 2 inches in diameter. And I'll show you why specifically I like a binder ring for when I use my bull rings. This is one of my typical bull rings with a binder clip. Here is another bull ring I got. I got this ring at a craft store, and then I use these lanyard snaps. So if you want to go with this version, you can clip in. There's a variation of bull ring where you clip in, and I'll explain how that works when I show you how to put one of these together. There's different ways to attach the strings. So we're going to get to that in just a moment. But this is a clip-in version. This is actually a connection version, and I'm going to show you when we get a little close-up, I'm going to show you how some other people attach their strings to the bull ring. So those are the supplies. Remember, you need some sort of a stand or a tower. You're going to want some string. This is my favorite. It's just small enough. It's inexpensive. It's very solid. You can use larger strings. Some people use the parachute cord, but it does get a little more expensive, because if you do a long bull ring string, it gets a little more expensive. And then you need a ring of some sort. All right, so those are the supplies. Depending on how many groups you have, you're going to need a stand usually for each group to at least start out, and then they'll switch stands with other people and you'll move things. I will put in some links in the blog post notes of different bull ring videos where people are using different kinds of stands and different ways that they're integrating the groups into a bull ring. So I'll include those in the notes, and any other ideas that I could point you to get you more familiar with a bull ring if this is your first exposure to it. So let's take a little closer look at attaching the strings to the ring. All right, so we have our ring of some sort. Traditionally, the first ring was just a solid steel ring. That was the recommended ring for the description that Kane and Jolliffe put together. And you just traditionally, you would tie that string right to the ring with a good knot that would hold that together. All right, then it basically stays together. There's nothing you can do with that. My first iteration of this was tying a little loop in this, tying a little overhand on a bite so you have a loop. And then what you can do to vary the number of strings on the ring, you can then put that loop through there and just girth the whole string right onto the ring. So what that allowed you to do is add or subtract strings to the ring. So it's nice and easy to take off, put on, take off, untangle. A lot of good reasons to do that. Instead of directly tying into a ring, I learned from a good friend of mine, Steve McIntosh, about clipping in. And the idea is getting those, remember we talked about these lanyard snaps. You can get these at craft stores, anywhere they sell like leather goods, they use these kinds of snaps. But his idea was to find out what kind of mission or what kind of goals or objectives a group has and assign that to the ring. Let's say the ring is clear communication. So that ring represents clear communication. Everyone gets a string with a clip on it. And then before you start the activity, you ask everybody to say, okay, if our goal is clear communication, how do you connect? How do you clip into that goal? So I might say, you know, I'm going to make sure I listen really carefully before I speak up. And then I'll clip that into the ring. And then each person says, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to commit to. And you connect to that mission or that objective or that representation of whatever it is, a strong team, a winning team, a compassionate team, anything that you are working on, now we're clipping in. So that was an amazing, my first variation of the bull ring that I really kind of advanced the learning outcomes of this activity. From there, what ended up happening is when I had a hard time finding these clips, there was a time where I couldn't find these clips, I ended up seeing these binder rings. So that gave me the idea of making that loop again, that overhand on a bite, and then you, instead of clipping in, you're connecting in. So what connects you to this mission or this objective? And then we put our strings on in that fashion, then we clip it together. And what ended up happening with this version is another kind of serendipitous learning is if you, as a group, if you manipulate the strings too hard or turn the ring in a certain way, it will open up and the ball will come off, the object will come off, strings will come off. And that related to that idea, if we put too much tension, if there's too much stress related to a task, something could happen. There could be a consequence that we have to figure out how to get around or fix and then get back to the task. So from that original idea of tying into the bull ring, first thing was I girthed the strings around. Then I learned about snapping in or connecting, clipping in. That's so cool. And this was then my most recent way to use a bull ring, by being able to add or subtract strings, and then that stressful application that comes up from time to time. And then one last thing before we go is about the colors. You notice that there are colors here. What I learned from someone along the way, I wish I could remember who that was, but the colors, having different colors during the activity, you can then do some variation around assigning tasks to people with the certain colors. So I might say only the people, for the next 2 minutes, only the people with white strings can talk verbally with the people in the group. I might say the people with the yellow strings now have lost a resource of their sight. So now, if you're holding a yellow string for the next 1 minute, you're going to be sightless. So please close your eyes. Then you can give them that choice to open their eyes or not. But I don't usually use blindfolds anymore. I just ask people to close their eyes. So what you're doing is changing the dynamics of the activity. You're taking away resources from people. You're taking away voice. You're taking away sight. You're giving people leadership opportunities that might not necessarily have those opportunities. You're also maybe quieting the ones that are talking a little bit too loud or too much. So you might identify those people, what color are they using, and then find out how the group operates when certain things are taken away or added to the experience. So it's another way then to vary this, the level of challenge or the level of complexity to a bull ring by having different colors. So let's go next to storing the bull ring. How do we get this? How do we put this equipment away so we can access it easily? Okay, now one of the most frustrating things about a bull ring is actually storing it and trying to prevent any tangles in the bull ring. One of the ways that has been probably the most successful for me is storing it in a bag of some sort. Now I have a plastic bag here. If you don't want to use plastic bags, maybe there's a pouch, a zipper pouch of some sort that you use for your activities. But I'll take all the strings of a bull ring and I'll do an overhand knot at the ends, because we know that ends are the things that tangle rope. So we want to manage at least the ends. Then I'll put that end in a bag, drop it all in there until we get the ring last. All right, get everything in there. And then just drop the ring on the top, okay? That's been a way that's worked for me pretty well. So when you're ready, you just go in there and you make sure that you grab that ring and you can pull that ring right out. And then when you get to the end, you untie your knot, and for the most part you should be tangle free, but it might take you a little bit, or the group, give it to the group and have the group untangle it for you. Could be part of that process. Another way is, if you know how to daisy chain, is to be able to daisy chain it. So you're making a loop like this, and then you're grabbing the string through the loop in this fashion. All right? So the idea is to loop, loop, loop. You may need to look online. Maybe there's probably a daisy chain type of video that shows you how to daisy chain. You get to the end, then you pull the end through. Now the challenge with that is there's this mystery way of undoing it. You should be able to just take out the end and pull it. That's the idea of a daisy chain. But for some reason, I still have not been able to understand how things get tangled. Like for instance, right now, there's a little tangle in this because there's a shorter string. So this is something that you're going to have to contend with. Find a really good way that works for you. A friend of mine who has these spools, he puts the ring on the spool so it holds, and then he wraps the string around here and then tucks that knot that he tied in, he tucks that knot into the top and then puts these in a bag or a container. So that's another way to store them. So be creative with it. That can be very frustrating when you pull them out, your group's ready, and then they're all tangled. How I've handled that is just give a bull ring set and give that to the group and say, please untangle this and get it into where all the strings are in a sunshine. There's a ring in a sunshine pattern of rays, and then lay it on the ground. So get them to do that work and see how they even get through that process together. So that's some storage tips. If you have any other good storage tips, please leave it in the comments below. All right, I hope you have enough information to put together your own bull ring set. I tend to work with, in reality, you only really need 3 people on a bull ring apparatus based on physics and the angles. By putting more people on the apparatus, there are more things you can work on as carrying the load, as leadership. How do you communicate with each other? What is your part in the process? Even though, yeah, you only need really 3 people, some people will figure that out. Well, you really only need 3 people to hold this. How do we include everybody in the process? How do we know everybody's sharing the work? How do we know who's controlling? Who is putting in a little bit too much force? Who's not putting in enough? What is our connection to the activity? As we talked about clipping in or connecting, what connects you to the group and how do you stay connected? What keeps you part of that group so that you can feel good about completing the tasks together? So all these little interesting nuances of a bull ring are fun to pull out. It's very visually engaging, and it's really fun, and it can be frustrating in leading with failure. How do we get over failure? How do we restart? How do we solve the problems that we encounter when the object drops? So there's a lot of cool things and a lot of neat ways you can lead bull ring in any sort of setting, indoors, outdoors, going up and down stairs, going under objects, going around things. So there's a lot of clever people doing some really neat things with the bull ring. So do a little digging around on the internet. I've left some links in the blog area so you can kind of click and see what other people are doing. And then if you come up with any great ideas, please feel free to send those to me or put them in the comments in the blog. We'd love to learn more. So I look forward to seeing you in the next Tools for Team Builders. Have fun out there.